The first time Isabella Laurent saw the gardener writing equations across her late husband's antique whiteboard, she thought she was witnessing betrayal. The numbers weren't simple sums or gardening measurements. They were sprawling, elegant formulas, symbols that twisted into integrals and limits, geometric sketches intersecting with algebraic proofs. And seated in front of that board, eyes shining with excitement, was her 10-year-old son, Oliver. For a moment, Isabella couldn't breathe. If you believe in kindness and second chances and in the quiet miracles hidden inside ordinary people, take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the truth is far more beautiful than what we assume. Isabella had built her life on certainty. As the CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire her late husband founded, she navigated mergers, boardrooms, and billion-dollar contracts without hesitation. She believed in data, in verified backgrounds and credentials framed on mahogany walls. She believed in knowing exactly who stood in her home. That was why she had hired Daniel Reyes 6 months ago, quietly, thoroughly vetted. Background checks, employment history, references from landscaping companies. Everything ordinary, everything clean. Daniel was supposed to trim hedges, plant roses, and maintain the expansive grounds of the Laurent estate. He was not supposed to be standing inside her private study, explaining advanced calculus to her son. Her first instinct was fury. Her son had struggled in school after his father's death. Grief had hollowed him out. Tutors came and went, their polished degrees unable to reach him. Oliver had withdrawn into silence, his spark dimmed by loss. And now here he was, laughing. The sound pierced Isabella's chest more sharply than any betrayal. She pushed the study door wider, heels clicking against polished wood. Daniel turned slowly, marker still in his hand. There was no panic in his eyes, no guilt, only something steady, calm, almost protective. Oliver looked over his shoulder and beamed, cheeks flushed with excitement. Isabella's mind raced. Had Daniel manipulated her son? Was this some elaborate scheme? Wealth attracted opportunists like moths to flame. She had learned that the hard way after her husband's passing. Distant relatives appearing with investment ideas, former acquaintances asking for loans, smiles hiding motives. She had sworn no one would exploit her child. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was controlled but icy. She demanded an explanation without raising it, the way powerful people do when they know anger isn't necessary to command fear. Daniel didn't shrink. He didn't defend himself with rehearsed excuses. He simply set the marker down and explained that Oliver had been watching him sketch equations during his lunch break outside, that the boy had asked questions. That curiosity had turned into lessons. He said Oliver understood patterns in ways most adults never could. Isabella felt the room tilt. Her son understood advanced mathematics? The private tutors she hired had reported average progress. Nothing remarkable. They blamed grief, distraction, emotional instability. She had believed them. But now, the whiteboard behind Daniel told a different story. The equations were not random scribbles. They were connected, logical, complex. And Oliver's notebook on the desk was filled with neat derivations written in a child's careful handwriting. A flicker of doubt crept into her certainty. Still, she dismissed Daniel from the study immediately. She reminded him of boundaries, of roles. She made it clear that while she appreciated initiative, she did not tolerate overstepping. Her voice remained composed, but her heart pounded like a warning drum. Daniel left without argument. That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. She replayed Oliver's laughter. She remembered the way his father used to sit in that same study, explaining algorithms with the same intensity Daniel had shown. Her husband had always said that genius often hides where no one bothers to look. The next morning, Isabella requested Oliver's school performance records in detail. She reviewed them herself instead of relying on summaries. What she found unsettled her. Oliver consistently aced pattern recognition tests. He solved optional challenge problems faster than older students. Teachers noted he often corrected textbook errors quietly. Yet during structured exams, he performed modestly as if holding back. A memory surfaced. Oliver once told her that his tutors talked too much. Isabella felt something crack inside her. Not anger this time, but humility. She called Daniel back into the study that afternoon. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows softened the tension between them. She asked him directly about his education. This time, he hesitated, and then he told her the truth. Daniel Reyes had once been Dr. Daniel Reyes, a mathematics prodigy who completed his PhD at 23. A rising star in theoretical physics, his research on nonlinear systems had attracted international attention. Isabella's breath caught. He had worked alongside some of the brightest minds in academia. He had lectured at prestigious universities. He had published papers that reshaped entire fields. And then, quietly, his world had collapsed. His younger sister, who had raised him after their parents died, fell critically ill. Medical bills mounted. Daniel left academia to care for her full-time. Grants disappeared. Positions were filled. Years passed in hospital corridors instead of lecture halls. By the time she passed away, Daniel's career had evaporated. With no recent references and gaps in employment, he couldn't secure a position in research. Pride prevented him from explaining his story in interviews. Eventually, he took landscaping work to survive. He never stopped solving equations in his mind. Isabella listened in stunned silence. The man she had reduced to trimmed hedges and flower beds had once shaped theoretical mathematics. The world had simply moved on without him. She felt shame bloom in her chest. She had judged him by his uniform. But more than that, she realized something even heavier. Oliver had found him. Or perhaps Daniel had found Oliver. Two brilliant minds separated by circumstance. Over the following weeks, Isabella allowed supervised lessons in the study. She observed quietly at first. What she saw transformed her understanding of both men. Daniel didn't teach like a professor performing for recognition. He guided Oliver through thought experiments. He encouraged mistakes. He asked questions that sparked wonder instead of demanding memorization. Oliver blossomed. His grief softened into focus. His nights of staring blankly at ceilings turned into evenings scribbling ideas in notebooks. He started smiling again. He began speaking about the future, about building machines, solving impossible problems, honoring his father through innovation. For the first time since the funeral, Isabella felt hope instead of fear. But hope brought its own challenge. The board of her company began pressuring her to expand into educational technology. They wanted flashy partnerships with famous institutions, public announcements, strategic branding. Isabella found herself thinking about Daniel, the man the world overlooked, the mind that recognized her son's gift before any credentialed tutor did. One evening, as she watched Daniel and Oliver debate the elegance of different proofs, Isabella made a decision that would alter all their lives. She offered Daniel a position, not as a gardener, but as head of a new research division focused on advanced learning systems for gifted children. The offer stunned him. He hesitated, not because he doubted his ability, but because he doubted the world's willingness to accept him again. Years away from academia had eroded his confidence. He feared scrutiny, rejection. Isabella understood that fear intimately. After her husband's death, investors questioned whether she could lead alone. She had felt underestimated too. She told Daniel that brilliance does not expire, that the world may overlook quiet genius, but she would not. He accepted. The announcement shook the board. Questions arose about credentials, about optics. Isabella stood firm. She presented Daniel's research history, his publications, his documented impact. She spoke not as a grieving widow or protective mother, but as a leader who recognized talent. The board relented. As months passed, Daniel's division flourished. They developed adaptive systems that identified hidden aptitude in children overlooked by standardized testing. Schools piloted the program. Results were astonishing. Students previously labeled average displayed extraordinary potential when taught differently. Investors shifted from skepticism to admiration. But the most profound change was inside the Laurent home. Oliver regained not just academic confidence, but emotional stability. Through mathematics, he processed his grief. He began writing letters to his late father, describing new concepts he had learned. Isabella found one of those letters tucked inside a textbook, and tears blurred her vision as she read it. She realized something simple yet powerful. Her wealth could buy tutors, technology, influence, but it could not manufacture authentic connection. Daniel had given her son something priceless: belief. One afternoon, Isabella walked through the garden Daniel once tended alone. The roses bloomed brighter than she remembered. She understood then that Daniel had never truly stopped being a gardener. He simply cultivated different soil now, young minds instead of flower beds. The press eventually caught wind of his story. Headlines praised the billionaire who promoted her gardener to genius researcher. But Isabella disliked the narrative. Daniel had always been a genius. She had simply taken time to see it. There were challenges, of course, whispers of favoritism, critics who questioned her motives, but success silenced most doubts. The educational platform Daniel built began transforming lives nationwide. And in quiet moments, Isabella would stand at the doorway of her study, the same place she once stood in suspicion, and watch Oliver immersed in equations, guided by a mentor who understood both loss and resilience. She would remember that first surge of anger and realize how close she had come to making a terrible mistake. Sometimes the people we underestimate are the ones sent to heal what we cannot fix ourselves. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the beauty hidden in unexpected places. Your support keeps these stories alive. And before we reach the end, I have a special request. Comment the word "believe" if you think talent deserves opportunity, no matter where it's found. Years later, when Oliver stood on a stage accepting a National Science Award for groundbreaking work in computational modeling, he credited many influences. He spoke about resilience, about curiosity, about refusing to let grief define him. And in the front row sat Isabella and Daniel. Not billionaire and gardener, not employer and employee, but family bound by something deeper than contracts or titles. As applause filled the auditorium, Isabella felt a quiet gratitude wash over her. She had once believed power meant control. Now she understood that true power lies in recognizing worth before the world applauds it. The billionaire had caught her gardener teaching advanced math, and in doing so, she had discovered not deception, but destiny. Sometimes the greatest investments we make are not in markets or companies. They are in people. The applause that night did not end when the curtains closed. It followed them home in the form of messages, interviews, invitations, and headlines that painted their journey like a modern fairy tale. The billionaire who trusted her gardener, the hidden genius rediscovered, the gifted child who rose from grief to brilliance. But real life is never as simple as headlines. In the weeks after Oliver's award ceremony, something subtle began to shift. Success, Isabella had learned long ago, always casts a shadow. And as Daniel's educational platform expanded nationally, critics began to emerge from places far more intimidating than gossip columns. Elite academic institutions questioned his unconventional methods. Traditional educators felt threatened by the adaptive system that exposed how many bright students had been misjudged for decades. Commentators dissected his past, digging through the years he had disappeared from academia. They found hospital records of his sister's illness. Ooze. They found the landscaping company payrolls. They found the silence in between, and they twisted it. Anonymous blogs implied fabrication. One op-ed suggested that a romantic redemption narrative was easier to sell than verifying his intellectual contributions. Social media churned with skepticism. Was he truly the mind behind the breakthroughs or merely a symbolic figurehead for Isabella's corporate ambition? For Daniel, the noise reopened wounds he thought had healed. He had never craved recognition, but he had risked believing again, in himself, in purpose. Now, the same world that once forgot him seemed eager to question his return. Isabella noticed the change immediately. Daniel grew quieter in meetings. His shoulders carried invisible weight. Late nights at the research center stretched longer, not out of passion alone, but out of a desperate need to prove again that he belonged. Oliver sensed it too. The boy who once lit up at the whiteboard began studying Daniel's expressions instead of equations. He understood what it meant to lose something you love. He had watched grief hollow out his mother. Now he feared doubt might hollow out his mentor. Isabella faced a difficult truth. She had brought Daniel back into the spotlight. She had given him opportunity, but she had also exposed him to scrutiny he never sought. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the study windows, Isabella found Daniel alone, staring at the same whiteboard where everything began. The equations written there were not incomplete. They were brilliant, elegant, but his gaze wasn't focused on them. It was distant. She did not speak immediately. She remembered the first time she stood at that doorway, convinced of betrayal. How small her perspective had been. This time she stepped fully into the room. Daniel admitted what he had tried to bury. The criticism did not anger him. It exhausted him. He had already lost years caring for his sister without regret. But returning to a world that demanded constant validation felt like running a marathon with old scars. Isabella listened not as a CEO, but as a friend. She told him something she had never shared publicly. After her husband's death, major investors attempted to remove her from leadership quietly. They claimed grief clouded judgment. They questioned whether she was emotionally stable enough to run a billion-dollar company. She had smiled through board meetings while lawyers prepared contingency plans behind her back. Success had not shielded her from doubt. It had amplified it. The difference, she said softly, was not the absence of critics. It was the decision to keep building anyway. Daniel absorbed her words slowly, but the true turning point did not come from press conferences or boardrooms. It came from a small envelope delivered to the research center 2 weeks later. Inside was a handwritten letter from a rural school teacher in a struggling district. She described a 12-year-old girl who had been labeled disruptive and unfocused for years. After implementing Daniel's adaptive program, they discovered she was solving complex spatial reasoning problems at levels beyond her grade. The girl had spent years believing she was a slow. The teacher wrote that the program gave her confidence for the first time. Attached was a drawing from the girl herself, a sketch of a rocket labeled "My Future." Daniel read the letter twice, then a third time. No academic journal citation could rival that. Meanwhile, Oliver faced his own unexpected challenge. His rapid advancement drew attention from universities eager to groom prodigies early. Invitations arrived for accelerated programs abroad, scholarships, exclusive mentorships. For Isabella, the offers represented opportunity. For Oliver, they represented distance. He was only 12. He had regained joy, stability, and belonging. The thought of sending him into elite institutions far from home reopened Isabella's deepest fear, losing him to ambition the way she had once nearly lost herself. One night, Oliver sat beside her on the terrace overlooking the city lights. He spoke with maturity beyond his years. He loved mathematics. He loved learning. But he loved being home more. He didn't want to rush childhood in pursuit of applause. Isabella felt a quiet revelation settle inside her. For years, she equated success with acceleration, faster growth. Bigger expansion, immediate scaling. But watching Oliver choose balance over prestige reminded her of something she had forgotten. Timing matters. She declined the early university placements. Instead, she invested further in Daniel's division, expanding access not to elite institutions but to underserved communities. If talent could hide in a billionaire's home disguised as a gardener, it could certainly hide in classrooms without resources. The initiative faced logistical hurdles. Funding rural schools required navigating complex bureaucracy. Some investors preferred focusing on affluent markets where profits were guaranteed. Isabella made a decision that shocked even her most loyal advisors. She reallocated a significant portion of corporate profits into a foundation dedicated solely to identifying overlooked talent worldwide. Share prices dipped temporarily. Analysts questioned the move, but Isabella no longer measured value strictly by quarterly reports. Daniel traveled occasionally to pilot schools, meeting students face to face. At first, media followed him, cameras capturing the former gardener turned genius. Eventually, the novelty faded. What remained was impact. Inner city classroom, a quiet boy who rarely spoke began designing intricate coding systems. In a coastal village, a girl who helped her family fish every morning demonstrated extraordinary aptitude in physics simulations. Each discovery reaffirmed Daniel's belief. Brilliance is not rare. Opportunity is. Back at the Lauren estate, the garden flourished under new staff, but Daniel still walked its paths sometimes. Not out of obligation, but gratitude. It reminded him where he had been when hope returned unexpectedly. One autumn afternoon, Isabella found him standing near the rose bushes he once tended daily. The air carried the scent of blooming petals and fallen leaves. She realized something profound. The story had never been about a billionaire rescuing a gardener. It had been about mutual recognition. Oliver joined them moments later, carrying a notebook filled not just with equations, but with sketches of ideas for expanding the foundation internationally. He spoke passionately about creating mentorship hubs in remote areas, connecting students through digital networks Daniel's team was building. Isabella saw her late husband in his intensity. She saw Daniel in his patience, and she saw herself in his determination. The three of them stood together, not defined by titles but by shared purpose. Years passed. The foundation grew beyond national borders. Partnerships formed with global educators. Technology evolved, becoming more intuitive, more inclusive. Critics still existed. They always would. But results silenced the loudest doubts. Oliver eventually chose to attend university, not because he felt pressured, but because he felt ready. He remained grounded, frequently visiting schools supported by the foundation to mentor students who reminded him of his younger self. Daniel regained academic recognition organically. Prestigious institutions invited him to lecture again, not because of a redemption narrative, but because his research spoke for itself. This time, he accepted invitations selectively, prioritizing impact over prestige. And Isabella, once known solely as a formidable business leader, became equally recognized for championing hidden potential. One evening, long after the cameras and headlines faded, Isabella returned to the study alone. The whiteboard had been replaced with a digital smart wall, but she kept the original frame nearby, faint marker stains still visible. She traced her fingers lightly over the frame. That day, she had walked in expecting betrayal. Instead, she had found transformation. Before we close this story, I want to ask you something heartfelt. If this journey of second chances, hidden talent, and quiet courage moved you in any way, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to comment any hidden genius below. Your words matter more than you know, because sometimes the world doesn't need more billionaires. It needs more people willing to look twice. Isabella once believed that security meant controlling every variable inside her world. Now she understood something deeper. True security comes from trust, from daring to believe that extraordinary gifts can exist in ordinary uniforms. The billionaire had caught her gardener teaching advanced math, and in choosing curiosity over suspicion, she had not only changed his life, she had changed countless others. In the end, the greatest equation they solved was not written on a whiteboard. It was written in faith, and it proved that when opportunity meets compassion, the result is limitless.